The new rogue subclass for Baldur's Gate 3 and patch 8 is the Swashbuckler. As with the sorcerer video, I'm just going to go through the new abilities that we get with the Swashbuckler, and I'm going to outline a build. This isn't so much with the items, but more just with the choices we make while leveling up. And there's going to be a certain subclass appearing again. What I'd say is a good idea is to have expertise in persuasion, and you'll notice I've got quite a high charisma here at level 1. When we pick the Swashbuckler subclass, we get just 2 features, which does seem like it's lacking a little bit. We'll look at them. So fancy footwork. If you make a melee attack against the target, it can't take an opportunity attack against you for the rest of your turn. This is half a feat. This is half the feat of mobile. Mobile gives you an extra 3 meters movement speed or 10 feet, plus this essentially fancy footwork. Also, we get a +2 bonus to initiative rolls, which scales with your rogue level, and you no longer need advantage to trigger sneak attack as long as you are within 1.5 meters of the target and don't have disadvantage. So it's even easier to get a sneak attack. The whole point is that you run in, hit someone and run out. At least that's kind of like the theme behind the subclass. What's quite unique is this subclass actually gets some bonuses at level 4. We get 3 new abilities. They're all bonus actions actually. Flick of the wrist, flick your weapon at a target and possibly disarm them, and you gain advantage on your next attack. Vicious Mockery is a bonus action, and you gain advantage on your next attack. Or Santos, potentially blind an enemy, and you gain advantage on your next attack. Flick of the wrist requires a dexterity saving throw against your spell save DC based on your charisma. Vicious Mockery is, as usual, a wisdom saving throw based on your charisma here. And Dirty Trick Santos is based on your dexterity. It doesn't say it, but it is. And we get our feat. I'm just going to pick up Actor here to even out charisma. At level 9, the other subclass feature that we get is Panache. So during combat, and you can do this during combat, it requires an action. There's no resource, you can just do it every turn if you wanted. You roll a persuasion check during combat to beguile a humanoid. You must contest it with an insight check. That should mean, hopefully, that hexing wisdom will be a good idea if you have a swashbuckler in your party. Enemies who failed it have the panache disadvantage, and that means they have disadvantage on all attack rolls except the caster, really casting panache, but the caster of panache. You're also unable to make opportunity attacks against other enemies other than the caster. This is strong, but the downside is it does use your action, and that's where you're probably going to get most of your damage. So it is a bit of a toss-up there. I'm going to pick up Savage Attacker just to show you whether it works or not. Right, so at level 12, we could pick up potentially another feat, or... why wouldn't you? Well, I can understand people want to roleplay not being a Hexblade, actually. But it's getting a bit ridiculous at how many classes or subclasses the Hexblade, a 1-level dip in Hexblade, works for. Why is that? Well, we get Booming Blade, so we can now have extra damage on our attack. Brilliant, and potentially cause damage if the enemy moves. Plus, 1 extra cantrip, maybe friends. We're going to have a high charisma. We are proficient with pretty much every charisma skill. We're an expert in some of them even. As for spells, we only get 1 per short rest. It's pretty difficult. I'm going with Hex. We can use the Strange Conduit Ring to do a little bit of extra damage. Maybe you want Shield as well. One thing I want to point out is that the Flick of the Wrist does require a finesse weapon, but you are more than likely going to be using a finesse weapon because you need a finesse weapon to actually use sneak attack with your melee weapon. And I'm going to take Crimson Mischief with me. Unfortunately, I can't actually see my spell save DC on the Swashbuckler screen, but because I picked up Warlock, I can see that, at least based on charisma, my spell save DC is 21, which I think is pretty good. I've got a few items that increase spell save DC, such as Kethric's Shield here, Amulet of the Devout, the Helldusk Gloves. They will help out. Our initiative is +7. 4 of that comes from Rakish Audacity. We can see here we get a +4 bonus to initiative rolls and +3 just from dexterity. But I will say that Swashbucklers do have the potential to have very high initiatives also, especially if you go in pure class, but an extra +2 at level 3 is not too bad. You know, Gloomstalkers can get a bonus, Barbarians get a bonus, so you can expect them to go quite early on inside the turn. Now, to make sure I do get to use Charisma for my attack, I do have to use my bind my hexed weapon, sorry. If you can, I would suggest you open combat with Hex, because actually you want to be using a bonus action every round for one of these 3. So yeah, initiative is 10 the total. So we're going to open up with Booming Blade. That was nice. That was 96 damage. Ah, that's because of the critical hit, obviously, right? So, the critical hit lets me roll all the damage dice twice. And I do want to point out that savage attacks do work with sneak attack as long as it's the melee, because that is stipulated in the feat. It does not work with ranged attacks, but it's never meant to. Right, next turn, I will show off some of these. I'll do them one at a time. Seeing the aura of murder here being inflicted upon me by imprudence actually does remind me the ballast armor would obviously be super effective here, because the damage we're doing is piercing, and we can make enemies vulnerable to piercing damage, so we really double most of the damage we do. I'm going to start with Flicker the Wrist. It's actually my favorite one. Oh. So we can see here the DC is 21. Saving throws 3 was their total, because they've got no bonus to dexterity. They've dropped their weapon. And I now have advantage. Dirty advantage. I love that. I don't know why, just dirty advantage. So I can use that against... Oh, I can almost certainly kill Churg Elvek here. Gone. That's just another lucky critical hit. One of the reasons I'm getting a few critical hits is because I've got the Dead Shot and Sarevok's Horned Helmet here. So the number I need for critical hit is 18, and with advantage, chances aren't too bad for that. Another item I don't have ready in this save file, which I would definitely recommend, is the Helmet of Grit, which is where if you are at 50% or lower hit points, you have an extra bonus action. A little bit risky, I will admit, but being able to do 2 of these every turn would be very, very strong. Next up, let's use Santos. I've accidentally... I should have had that asked on. Never mind. Interestingly, it does bludgeoning damage. I suppose sand is bludgeoning in a way. Rating, whatever. And can proc sneak attack. And now they're blinded, which is really nice, because then everyone can just walk away. Again, I'm going to use Proving Blade. Unfortunately, I lost concentration, so I don't have the extra psychic damage from the strange conduit ring. And this is kind of the one downside, having only 1 level in Warlock. We get 1 level 1 spell slot for a short rest. It's there to use as a small bonus, but we're not really relying on it. You know, I could easily switch out that ring for something else. Got 2 things left to show you. I mean, this is just vicious mockery, right? Vicious mockery is vicious mockery. I've still got the Resonance Stone. I think it's on Shadow Heart, which is why that did it. Not too bad about damage for a bonus action. And let's try Panache, shall we? I don't have anyone hexed. Oh well. Let's do it on Darts, Dirtwood. So there was a Persuasion check. They must have rolled a total of 11 on their Insight. My minimum roll for a skill check is 10. So, I mean, there's basically no way I'm failing that. I rolled 31. So they received Panache disadvantage. Just want to remind you, they've got disadvantage on attack rolls on everyone else apart from my Swashbuckler here, as I named her. They can't make opportunity attacks while they're wielding a ranged weapon, so they couldn't do that anyway. But like I said, that was my action to do that. Use my action to do that. And so she can't do anything else this turn. My favorite thing here is Flicker the Wrist. It does just a decent amount of damage. Plus, disarming enemies is really good. I do want to point out though, if an enemy doesn't have a weapon, you can't use Flicker the Wrist on them. Oopsie daisy, here come the Steel Watchers. So now Flicker the Wrist, I can't use Flicker the Wrist because they do not have a weapon in their main hand, which means I'm then reduced to using one of the others. I'm going to run away before the Steel Watchers come and kill me. You let me know what you think of the new Swashbuckler subclass. I really like it. I really like having an option for my bonus action every single turn. And they're useful. Vicious Mockery is nice to have as a bonus action. Being able to blind people and disarm them. The only downside is you're kind of stuck with those 3. There's no choice there. But personally, I like those choices. I'm not unhappy with those choices whatsoever. Obviously, you don't have to use a Hexblade with this. You don't want to. Just make sure your dexterity is at 20, as high as it can go. I would recommend having some stats in Charisma though. Normally, rogues don't normally need strength. Intelligence would be useful if they are casting from items like scrolls or any other item that grants a spell. Because even though Swashbucklers use Charisma for a couple of their individual abilities, it doesn't change the ability for the whole class. Let's see how this works out. Not too badly actually. And then we can run away. So yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you to all the members of my channel, and I'll catch you in the next one.